My son's wife said I smell like old people, but she didn't know I was funding her business. I never thought I'd be the kind of mother who'd be pushed aside like yesterday's newspaper. For 45 years, I poured every ounce of love into raising my son, Michael. I sacrificed sleep, relationships, my career dreams, everything, just so he could have the opportunities I never had. When he married Vanessa 5 years ago, I welcomed her with open arms, thinking she'd be the daughter I never had. But 3 days ago, as I was helping prepare dinner in their home, I overheard her whisper to Michael, "Can you ask your mother to stop coming over so often? She smells like old people and it's embarrassing when my friends are here." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The knife I was using to chop carrots froze mid-air. My heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. What made it worse? Michael didn't defend me. He just nodded and mumbled, "I'll talk to her." What they didn't know was that I'd been secretly funding Vanessa's boutique fashion business for the past 3 years. Every month, I transferred $15,000 from my savings into their business account, labeled as Anonymous Investor. The business that was making Vanessa a rising star in our city's fashion scene, the business she bragged about building all by herself, was thriving because of my money. And now, it was time they learned the truth. My name is Eleanor Wright. I was barely 20 years old when I discovered I was pregnant with Michael. His father, James, had already left town by then, claiming he wasn't ready for responsibility. I was working as a waitress at a local diner, making just enough to keep the lights on in my tiny apartment. The pregnancy wasn't easy. Morning sickness kept me hunched over the toilet bowl for hours, but I couldn't afford to miss shifts. Some days, I served tables with a smile plastered on my face while feeling like my insides were being torn apart. The diner manager, a gruff but kind-hearted man named Frank, would sometimes slip extra food into my staff meals. "For the little one," he'd say with a wink. When Michael was born, 7 pounds, 6 ounces of pure perfection, I made a promise to him as I held his tiny hand in the hospital room. "I will give you everything I never had," I whispered. "You'll never know what it feels like to go without." And I kept that promise through hell and high water. I worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs. During the day, I waited tables. At night, I cleaned office buildings. On weekends, I took typing classes at the community college, determined to build a better future for us. There were nights I'd crawl into bed at 2 a.m., only to wake up at 5 a.m. to prepare Michael's lunch before my morning shift. We lived in a 1-bedroom apartment. Michael had the bedroom. I slept on a pull-out couch in the living room. I never wanted him to feel the sting of poverty like I had. When other kids got new sneakers, Michael got them too, even if it meant I ate ramen noodles for a month straight. By the time Michael started elementary school, I had managed to secure a receptionist position at Harrington and Associates, a small but growing accounting firm. The pay wasn't spectacular, but the hours were consistent, and they offered benefits, something I'd never had before. For the first time in years, I didn't have to choose between paying for Michael's school field trips or keeping our electricity. Mr. Harrington, the firm's founder, noticed my dedication. I was always the first to arrive and the last to leave. When the office needed extra help with filing or client communications, I volunteered. I didn't have a college degree, but I had determination in spades. "Eleanor," Mr. Harrington said one Friday afternoon, "I've been watching you. You have a natural talent for connecting with clients and organizing information. Have you ever considered advancing your career here?" I explained that while I'd love to, I couldn't afford college, tuition while supporting my son. That's when he offered me the opportunity that would change everything. The firm would pay for me to take accounting courses if I committed to working there for at least 5 years after completion. By the time Michael was in middle school, I had become a certified bookkeeper, and our financial situation had stabilized somewhat. We moved into a modest two-bedroom apartment in a safer neighborhood with better schools. I could finally afford to enroll Michael in after-school programs, soccer, science club, piano lessons, all the enrichment activities I believed would help him thrive. Michael was a bright child, curious and quick to learn. His teachers praised his intelligence and creativity. When he expressed interest in computers, I saved for 6 months to buy him a decent one. I wanted nothing to stand in the way of his potential. High school brought new challenges. Michael wanted the designer clothes his wealthier friends wore, the latest gaming systems, summer camps that cost more than our monthly rent. I took on freelance bookkeeping work on weekends to make it happen. There were times I was so exhausted, I would fall asleep at the dinner table, fork still in hand. "Mom, you work too hard," 16-year-old Michael said one night as he gently woke me. "It's all for you, sweetheart," I replied, patting his hand. "I want you to have every opportunity." When college application season arrived, Michael set his sights on prestigious universities. The tuition figures made my stomach drop, but I never let him see my worry. Instead, I met with financial advisors, researched scholarships, and took out a second mortgage on the small house I had managed to purchase a few years earlier. Michael was accepted to Berkeley with a partial scholarship. The day the acceptance letter arrived, I took him out for a celebratory dinner at a restaurant we couldn't really afford. As we clinked glasses of sparkling cider, his eyes shining with excitement, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment. This was why I had worked so hard, to see my son reach heights I could only dream of. Throughout college, I sent care packages, with homemade cookies and notes of encouragement. I worked overtime to help with his textbooks and living expenses. When Michael called to say he'd been accepted into a summer internship program at a tech company but couldn't afford the professional wardrobe he needed, I sold my mother's antique jewelry, the only valuable possession I had inherited, to buy him suits and ties. By his senior year, Michael had secured a job offer at Horizon Technologies, a fast-growing software company in the city. His starting salary was nearly twice what I was making after 20 years of work. I couldn't have been prouder. "You did it, Mom," he said at his graduation, hugging me tight. "You made all this possible." Those words warmed my heart. He recognized my sacrifices. He understood what I had given up for him. Or so I thought. After graduation, Michael moved to the city for his new job. I remained in our small town, continuing my work at Harrington and Associates, which had grown considerably over the years. Mr. Harrington had retired, but his son, Robert Harrington Jr., recognized my value to the firm and promoted me to office manager. Michael would visit occasionally, but as his career accelerated, those visits became less frequent. Phone calls shortened. Texts went unanswered for days. I told myself this was normal. He was building his own life, establishing himself professionally. I shouldn't expect to be his priority anymore. Then, during one of his rare visits home for Christmas, Michael announced he was dating someone serious. Her name was Vanessa Chen, a fashion design graduate working on launching her own clothing line. She came from a wealthy family with connections in the fashion industry, but according to Michael, she was determined to make it on her own merit. "She's amazing, Mom," Michael said, his eyes bright with infatuation. "She's talented, ambitious, and she comes from a really sophisticated background. I think you'll love her." 6 months later, they were engaged. The wedding was lavish, clearly influenced by Vanessa's upbringing and expectations. Her parents contributed substantially, while I emptied my modest savings to help Michael match their contribution. I didn't want him to feel embarrassed by what I could offer. The wedding was the first time I truly felt the gulf between my world and Vanessa's. Her family arrived in luxury cars, dressed in designer outfits. Her father, Dr. Chen, was a renowned surgeon. Her mother, Olivia, ran a successful interior design firm. They were polite but distant toward me, their conversations peppered with references to vacation homes and charity galas, experiences so far removed from my reality. During the reception, I overheard Olivia telling another guest, "Michael has such potential. We're so pleased Vanessa found someone with ambition, even if his background is humble." The words stung, but I smiled through it. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. This day wasn't about me. It was about Michael's happiness. After the honeymoon, the newlyweds settled into a sleek downtown apartment. When I visited, bringing homemade curtains I'd sewn as a housewarming gift, Vanessa thanked me with a tight smile before setting them aside. Later, I noticed they were never hung. Instead, designer drapes adorned their windows, probably selected by Olivia. It became a pattern. My cooking was too heavy, my clothes too dated, my opinions too simple. Each time I visited, I felt increasingly out of place in my son's new life. Then came the day Vanessa announced she was finally ready to launch her fashion brand, Vanessa Chen Designs. The concept was accessible luxury for young professional women. She had the creative vision and industry connections through her family, but she needed capital. "It's my dream, Eleanor," she said during one of their visits to my house. "I've been working towards this my whole life, but startup costs are so high, and we're trying to do this without depending on my parents. We want to build something on our own." I glanced at Michael, who was nodding enthusiastically. "Vanessa's incredibly talented, Mom. This could be huge, if she gets the right start." Later that night, after they'd gone, I sat at my kitchen table reviewing my finances. Over the years, I had been cautious with money, always maintaining an emergency fund and saving what I could. Additionally, Robert Harrington Jr. had implemented a profit-sharing plan for long-term employees, which had built up a decent sum for me. I had been saving it for retirement, but seeing the passion in my son's eyes when he talked about his wife's dreams. Well, what was retirement compared to their happiness? The next day, I called my bank and arranged for a monthly transfer of $15,000 to be sent to the business account Vanessa had mentioned, marked as Anonymous Investor. I didn't tell them it was me. I wanted them to succeed on their own terms, without feeling indebted to me. I could live more frugally. My needs were simple compared to their aspirations. For 3 years, I watched from a distance as Vanessa Chen Designs grew from a small online store to a boutique in a trendy neighborhood. Michael would proudly share updates: their first major sale, a feature in a local fashion magazine, a pop-up shop during Fashion Week. I beamed with pride, knowing I was part of their success story, even if they didn't know it. Sometimes, during my visits to the city, I would walk past their boutique, watching customers browse through the elegant clothes displayed in the window. Once I even gathered the courage to go inside, pretending to be just another customer. Vanessa was there, explaining her design philosophy to a group of fashionable young women. She didn't recognize me at first without Michael by my side. I was just another middle-aged woman, unremarkable in my department store outfit. When she finally noticed me, her smile faltered slightly. "Eleanor, what a surprise! Michael didn't mention you were coming to town." "It was a spontaneous trip," I lied. "Your store is beautiful, Vanessa. You've done amazingly well." She preened at the compliment. "It's been a lot of hard work, but we've been fortunate to have a mystery investor who believed in us from the beginning. That really made all the difference." I nodded, my heart warming at being acknowledged, even if she didn't know it was me. How wonderful. Someone must really believe in your talent. Her expression shifted slightly, a hint of condescension creeping in. "Well, yes. When you have a unique vision and the drive to execute it, the right people notice." As I moved to touch one of the silky blouses displayed nearby, she subtly stepped forward, Perhaps you'd be more comfortable looking at our basics collection. It's more age-appropriate." The comment stung, but I smiled through it. This was my son's wife, and I was determined to support their happiness, regardless of how she treated me. That pattern continued for another year. I would visit their apartment for dinner once a month, bringing home-cooked meals that Vanessa would politely decline. "We're trying this new diet, Eleanor." I would ask about the business, genuinely interested in its growth, only to receive vague, simplified answers, as if I couldn't possibly understand the complexities of fashion retail. Michael seemed increasingly caught between us, occasionally defending me but more often apologizing for my old-fashioned ways. He had begun to see me through Vanessa's eyes, as someone slightly embarrassing, someone whose opinions and tastes weren't quite refined enough for their world. Then came the dinner 3 days ago, when I overheard Vanessa's cruel comment about me smelling like old people. The pain of those words was eclipsed only by Michael's failure to stand up for me. As I stood frozen in their kitchen, knife hovering over the carrots I'd been chopping, I realized something fundamental had shifted. Years of subtle dismissals had culminated in outright rejection. That night, as I drove home alone, tears blurring my vision, I made a decision. It was time for truth. Time for my son and his wife to understand exactly what kind of person they had been pushing aside. The next morning, I called Robert Harrington Jr. and asked for a favor. As the firm that handled the accounting for Vanessa Chen Designs, Harrington and Associates had access to all the financial records. I needed documentation of my contributions, proof of every penny I had invested in their success. "Are you sure about this, Eleanor?" Robert asked, concern evident in his voice. He had known me for decades and understood what this business meant to my son and daughter-in-law. "I'm sure," I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. "It's time for a little clarity in our family." The next day, I arrived at Vanessa's boutique just before closing time. Through the window, I could see her chatting with a customer, radiant, in one of her own designs, a dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. I waited patiently until the customer left, then entered as Vanessa was preparing to lock up. Her surprise at seeing me quickly morphed into barely concealed annoyance. "Eleanor, Michael's not here. He's working late tonight." "I know," I said calmly. "I came to see you, actually." Confusion flickered across her face. "Me? Is something wrong?" I set my purse on the counter and looked around the beautifully decorated space, the custom fixtures, the elegant displays, the sophisticated lighting that showcased each garment perfectly, all of it funded in large part by my monthly transfers. "Vanessa," I began, "I wanted to talk to you about your mysterious investor." She sighed, reaching to adjust a mannequin's collar. "This really isn't a good time for business talk, Eleanor. I'm about to close, and I have dinner plans with some industry contacts." "This won't take long," I promised, pulling an envelope from my purse. "I just thought you might want to know who's been funding your dream for the past 3 years." Her perfectly manicured fingers froze on the mannequin's collar. "What are you talking about?" Vanessa's voice had lost its practiced smoothness, a hint of wariness creeping in. I laid the envelope on the glass counter between us. 3 years ago, when you were just starting out, you began receiving monthly transfers of $15,000. The money came from an account labeled Anonymous Investor. That investor was me, Vanessa. She stared at me, her expression cycling rapidly through confusion, disbelief, and something that looked almost like fear. That's not possible. It's not only possible, it's the truth." I slid the envelope toward her. "These are the bank statements showing every transfer I've made to your business account since you started. $180,000 each year for 3 years. That's $540,000 total." Vanessa's hand trembled slightly as she opened the envelope and pulled out the stack of papers inside. Her eyes darted over the figures, the dates, the account numbers that confirmed everything I had said. the color drained from her flawless complexion. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why would you? How could you possibly have that kind of money?" I finished for her. "Because contrary to what you and your family seem to believe, I'm not just some simple small-town woman who got lucky having a successful son. I've worked hard all my life. I've been smart with my money. And most importantly, I believed in family enough to invest everything I had in yours and Michael's future." She sank slowly onto a nearby stool, the papers clutched in her hand. "Does Michael know?" "No," I replied. "I wanted your business to succeed on its own merits. I didn't want either of you to feel indebted to me." Vanessa looked up at me, her carefully constructed facade crumbling. For the first time since I'd known her, she seemed genuinely lost for words. I hadn't come to gloat or to demand gratitude. That had never been my intention when I started the payments. But standing there, watching realization dawn on her face, I felt something shift inside me. A lifetime of being overlooked, underestimated, and lately, disrespected, crystallized into a moment of perfect clarity. "You asked Michael to tell me not to come over so often," I said quietly. "You said I smell like old people and it's embarrassing when your friends visit." Her eyes widened with shock. You heard that?" "I was in the kitchen, chopping carrots for the dinner I was helping prepare." I kept my voice steady, even as the memory of those words twisted like a knife in my chest. "Michael didn't defend me. He just agreed with you." Vanessa had the grace to look ashamed, her gaze dropping to the financial statements spread across the counter. "Eleanor, I don't want an apology if it's not sincere," I interrupted. "What I want is respect. Not because I've been funding your business, but because I'm Michael's mother. Because I've spent my entire adult life making sure he had every opportunity to succeed, to become the man you married, to be able to support your dreams while you got your business off the ground." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I didn't come here to threaten you or to demand the money back. What's done is done. I invested in your business because I believed in my son's happiness and in your talent. The money was a gift, not a loan." "Then why tell me now?" Vanessa asked, her voice small. "Because it's time you understood who I really am," I replied simply. "Not just an embarrassing mother-in-law who smells like old people, but a woman who sacrificed everything for her family, including you, when you became part of that family. Whether you choose to tell Michael or not is up to you. But know this, I won't be treated like that again." With those words, I turned and walked. Toward the door, my head held high. Just as my hand touched the handle, Vanessa called out, "Eleanor, wait." Her voice sounded different, stripped of its usual polished condescension. "Please." I paused but didn't turn around. I had no idea," she continued. "All this time, I thought it was one of my professors from design school or someone. My parents knew. I never imagined that someone like me could have that kind of money?" I finished, finally turning to face her. She flinched slightly. "That's not... I didn't mean..." "It's exactly what you meant, Vanessa. It's what you've always thought about me." I gestured around the boutique. All of this, the beautiful clothes, the perfect space, the magazine features, none of it would exist without that old woman you're so embarrassed to have around. Tears welled in her eyes, whether from genuine remorse or simply the shock of being confronted, I couldn't tell. "What are you going to do now?" It was a loaded question. We both knew I could withdraw my financial support, effectively crippling her business before it had truly established itself. The monthly transfers represented the bulk of her operating capital, covering everything from material costs to rent on the boutique space. "Nothing," I said after a long moment. "The money was a gift, as I said. I won't take it back or stop the transfers, but from now on, you'll know exactly who's helping make your dreams come true." The bell above the door jingled softly as I stepped out into the evening air, leaving Vanessa alone with the truth and a pile of bank statements that told the story of a mother's love and the true cost of her sacrifice. The drive home felt surreal. After 3 years of secret support, of watching from the periphery as Vanessa built her brand on my investment, the truth was finally out, at least to her. Whether she would share it with Michael remained to be seen. Part of me hoped she would. Another part dreaded the conversation that would inevitably follow. Would he be angry that I had kept such a significant secret? Would he feel manipulated? Or would he finally recognize the lengths I had gone to ensure his happiness, even when it meant accepting disrespect and dismissal? I pulled into my driveway, the modest ranch house I'd bought 15 years ago, a stark contrast to Michael and Vanessa's sleek downtown apartment. The porch light cast a warm glow over the garden I tended each weekend, the rose bushes I'd planted. The year Michael graduated from college, the wind chimes he'd given me for Mother's Day before he met Vanessa. Inside, I kicked off my shoes and sank onto the sofa, emotionally drained. My phone sat silent on the coffee table. No calls, no texts. Whatever Vanessa's reaction to my revelation, she hadn't immediately reached out to Michael. I made a cup of tea and tried to focus on a mystery novel I'd been reading, but the words blurred on the page. My mind kept replaying the look on Vanessa's face when she realized that her mysterious benefactor, the anonymous investor she'd mentioned so proudly to fashion bloggers and magazine writers, was the same woman she'd told her husband to keep away because she smelled like old people. The irony wasn't lost on me. For 3 years, I had been both essential to her success and invisible in her life. Valued for my money, but not for myself. It was a painful echo of so many relationships I'd encountered over the years where what I could provide was welcomed, but who I was remained unseen. It had been like that with Michael's father, who had been happy to accept my adoration and support while he pursued his music career, only to vanish when parenthood loomed. It had been like that with some of Michael's teachers, who appreciated the volunteer hours I put in at school events but excluded me from the parent committees because I didn't have the right connections or background. It had even been like that with Michael at times, especially in recent years, as he climbed the corporate ladder and began to see me through the lens of his new social circle. I was dozing off, the book fallen to my lap, when the doorbell rang. Startled, I glanced at the clock. It was nearly 11 p.m., far too late for casual visitors. When I opened the door, Michael stood on my porch, his face pale and drawn in the yellow porch light. Behind him, Vanessa waited by their car, her posture uncharacteristically uncertain. "Mom," Michael said, his voice tight. "We need to talk." I stepped back to let him in, noticing that Vanessa remained by the car. "Just you?" He glanced over his shoulder. "For now. We thought it might be better if I spoke to you first." I nodded and led him to the living room, where he paced restlessly while I settled back onto the sofa. "Vanessa told me everything," he began without preamble. "About the money, the transfers, all of it." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of his teenage years that it momentarily transported me back in time. "Why didn't you tell me, Mom? All this time you've been funding her business and you never said a word." "Would it have made a difference?" I asked quietly. "Would you have treated me differently if you'd known?" He stopped pacing, his expression shifting from frustration to something more complex. "What kind of question is that? Of course it would have made a difference. We've been taking your money." "Vanessa's been taking my investment," I corrected. "And it wasn't about buying better treatment, Michael. It was about supporting your wife's dreams because they were important to you." "But you couldn't afford—" "I could afford it," I interrupted firmly. "Despite what you and Vanessa seem to think, I'm not destitute. I've worked hard all my life. I've saved. I've invested. The profit-sharing plan at Harrington and Associates has been very generous. Michael sank into the armchair across from me, his expression bewildered. But you live so. Simply. Because that's what I choose, I replied. My needs aren't extravagant. I don't need designer clothes or luxury vacations to be happy. But that doesn't mean I don't have the means to help my family when they need it. He was quiet for a long moment, absorbing this. Vanessa told me what she said, about you smelling like old people. His voice was low, ashamed. And that I didn't defend you. I met his gaze steadily. Yes. I'm sorry, Mom. I should have said something. I should have told her that wasn't okay. Yes, you should have, I agreed, not willing to let him off the hook easily. It hurt, Michael. Not just the comment itself, but the fact that you sat there nodding along like I was a problem to be managed rather than your mother who loves you. He looked down at his hands. I know. I got caught up in everything. Vanessa's world, her family, the way they live. I started seeing things through their eyes, including you. He met my gaze again, regret etched in his features. But that's no excuse. You deserved better from me. I did, I said simply. And I still do. Michael nodded, acknowledging the truth of my words. So what happens now? Vanessa's freaking out. She thinks you're going to pull your investment and tank her business. Is that what you think I'd do? No, he said quickly. No, that's not. You're not vindictive, Mom. You never have been, even when people deserved it. I smiled faintly. At that, he did know me, even if he'd temporarily lost sight of who I was. I told Vanessa the money was a gift, not a loan. I won't take it back or stop the transfers. Relief washed over his face. Thank you, but why? After the way we've treated you. Because that's what mothers do, Michael, I said softly. We give without expecting anything in return. We sacrifice without keeping score. We love unconditionally. I leaned forward slightly. But that doesn't mean we don't deserve respect. He nodded slowly. I understand. Things are going to change. Mom, I promise. I hope so, I replied, because I can't keep being the convenient ATM you both barely tolerate in your lives. It's not about the money. It never has been. It's about recognizing my worth beyond what I can provide financially. Michael stood and crossed the room to sit beside me on the sofa. Hesitantly, he reached for my hand. I'm so sorry, Mom. I got lost for a while there, trying to fit into Vanessa's world. But I never stopped loving you. I never stopped being grateful for everything you've sacrificed for me. I squeezed his hand, allowing myself to hope that perhaps this revelation could be a turning point for all of us. I know, sweetheart. But sometimes love isn't enough if it's not backed by actions. Things will be different, he promised again. Starting right now. He glanced toward the door. Vanessa's outside. She's too ashamed to come in, but she wants to talk to you, if you're willing. I considered this for a moment. Bring her in. Michael went to the door and beckoned to his wife. A minute later, Vanessa entered my living room, her usual confident, demeanor notably absent. She had clearly been crying. Her mascara was smudged and her eyes were red-rimmed. Eleanor, she began, her voice unsteady. I don't even know where to start. What I said was unforgivable. And the fact that you've been the one supporting my business all this time. She trailed off, seemingly at a loss for words. Sit down, Vanessa, I said, gesturing to the armchair Michael had vacated. She perched on the edge of the seat, tension evident in every line of her body. I've been horrible to you, she continued after a moment. Condescending, dismissive. I thought, I was better than you because of my family's background, my education, my supposed business acumen. She gave a bitter laugh. And all along you were the one making my dream possible. I didn't do it to hold it over your head, I said. I did it because you're family. But I never treated you like family, she admitted, her gaze dropping to her hands. I treated you like an embarrassing obligation, someone to be tolerated for Michael's sake. Yes, you did, I agreed, not softening the truth. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm asking for it anyway. And I'm asking for a chance to make things right. To show you the respect you've always deserved, but I was too blind and selfish to give. I studied her for a long moment, trying to gauge her sincerity. Was this genuine remorse, or simply fear of losing her financial backing? The woman sitting before me, stripped of her usual poise and superiority, seemed genuinely shaken by the revelation of who had been supporting her. All along, Vanessa, I said finally, I don't need grand gestures or dramatic apologies. What I need is to be treated with basic human decency and respect. Not just because I'm your investor, but because I'm Michael's mother and a person worthy of dignity, in my own right. She nodded earnestly. I understand. And I will, Eleanor. I promise. Actions speak louder than words, I reminded her. So we'll see. The investment, she said hesitantly. You said you wouldn't withdraw it, but if you wanted to, I would understand. What I said was inexcusable. The money was never about buying your affection or respect, Vanessa. It was about helping Michael's wife build something she was passionate about. That hasn't changed. Relief flooded her features, followed quickly by shame at her obvious concern for the financial aspect of our relationship. Thank you, she whispered. I don't deserve your generosity. No, you don't, I agreed bluntly. But family isn't about deserving. It's about choosing to love and support each other through good times and bad. Michael, who had been silent during this exchange, moved to stand behind his wife, placing his hands on her shoulders. We're going to do better, Mom. Both of us. I nodded, allowing myself to hope it was true. I'd like that. An uncomfortable silence settled over the room, the air heavy with unspoken emotions and the weight of years of accumulated hurts laid bare. Finally, Vanessa spoke again, her voice small but determined. Would you be willing to come to the boutique tomorrow? There's something I'd like to show you. Some designs I've been working on that I think you might appreciate. It was a small olive branch, but a significant one from a woman who had previously gone out of her way to exclude me from her professional life. I'd like that, I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. They left shortly after, the late hour and emotional exhaustion taking its toll on all of us. As I closed the door behind them, I felt lighter somehow, as if a burden I hadn't even fully acknowledged had been lifted from my shoulders. The truth was out, messy, painful, but cleansing in its way. Whether this revelation would truly change anything remained to be seen. Promises made in moments of emotional upheaval didn't always translate to lasting change, but for the first time in years, I felt seen by my son and his wife, not just as a convenient source of financial support or an embarrassing reminder of Michael's working-class roots, but as a person with my own value and dignity. The next morning, I woke to a text from Michael. Picking you up at 10 for brunch, then Vanessa's boutique. Love you, Mom. It was a small thing, that message, but it sent a wave of cautious hope through me. Perhaps the truth really could set us free, from pretense, from judgment, from the invisible walls that had grown between us over the years. I dressed carefully, choosing an outfit I felt comfortable and confident in, not trying to impress Vanessa or fit into her world, but simply being myself. As I waited for Michael's car to pull into the driveway, I found myself reflecting on the irony of the situation. For years, I had hidden my financial support of Vanessa's business, allowing myself to be treated as less than by the very people I was helping succeed. It had been a form of self-erasure, born of a lifetime of putting others' needs before my own. In revealing the truth, I had finally asserted my own worth, not just as a provider, but as a person deserving of basic dignity and respect. Michael arrived precisely at 10, stepping out of his car to greet me with a hug that felt different from our recent embraces, warmer, more genuine, less perfunctory. "You look great, Mom," he said, and for the first time in a long while, his compliment didn't sound like it came with an unspoken, "for your age" qualifier. Brunch was at a small cafe near the water, the kind of place where the food was simple, but excellent, and the atmosphere unpretentious. It wasn't the type of trendy, Instagram-worthy establishment Vanessa usually preferred, which made the choice feel deliberate, a subtle acknowledgement of my preferences. We talked more openly than we had in years. Michael asked about my work, my friends, my garden, aspects of my life he had shown little interest in recently. I, in turn, asked about his career at Horizon Technologies, genuinely curious about the project management role he'd been promoted to 6 months earlier. "I've been thinking about what you said last night," he said as we finished our meal. "About how you've been treated like an ATM rather than a mother." He stirred his coffee absently. "It made me realize how much I've taken you for granted. Not just recently, but maybe always. You've been so consistently supportive, so reliable, that I stopped seeing the sacrifice behind it." "It's easy to take for granted what's always been there," I replied. "The older I get, the more I understand that about my own mother." He nodded. "Still, I should have been better, more aware." He reached across the table to take my hand. "I'm going to be better, Mom, I promise." After brunch, we drove to Vanessa's boutique in comfortable silence. The closed sign was still displayed in the window, but Vanessa was visible through the glass, rearranging a display with focused intensity. When she saw us approach, she hurried to unlock the door. "Eleanor," she greeted me, her usual polished smile replaced by something more tentative, more genuine. "Thank you for coming." I followed her inside, noting subtle changes in the boutique since my visit the previous evening. Several mannequins had been moved, their outfits replaced with new designs I hadn't seen before. "I was up most of the night," Vanessa explained, gesturing to the new displays. "After you left, after Michael, and I talked, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about everything I've done wrong, everything I've taken for granted." She drew a deep breath. "And I realized something about my designs." She led me to a mannequin dressed in an elegant pantsuit of soft blue. "For 3 years, I've been creating clothes for women like my mother, my friends, women from privileged backgrounds with certain aesthetic sensibilities. I've been ignoring an entire market of professional women who want elegant, well-made clothes that aren't extravagantly priced or impractically trendy." I examined the pantsuit more closely, appreciating its clean lines, the quality of the fabric, the thoughtful details that elevated it from basic to special. "Women like you, Eleanor," Vanessa continued softly. "Accomplished, intelligent women who deserve beautiful things that reflect their worth, not their social status or age." She gestured around the boutique. "This new collection was inspired by you, by your strength, your dignity, your quiet confidence." I've been calling it the Eleanor Collection in my head. I was speechless, genuinely touched by both the gesture and the sincerity behind it. It wasn't just about the clothes themselves, which were indeed lovely. It was about what they represented. Vanessa had seen me, really seen me, perhaps for the first time. "There's something else," she said, moving toward the counter and retrieving a folder. "I've been thinking about the business structure. You've been investing in Vanessa Chen Designs for 3 years without any formal recognition or stake in the company. She handed me the folder. Inside were legal documents outlining a partnership agreement, offering me a 40% ownership stake in the business. You shouldn't be a silent investor, Vanessa said earnestly. You should be a partner, with formal recognition and a voice in the direction of the company you've helped build. Michael, who had been quietly observing our interaction, stepped forward. It was Vanessa's idea, he said. She spent half the night on the phone with her lawyer, insisting they draw up the paperwork immediately. I looked between them. These two people who had dismissed me so thoroughly just days before, now offering me not just a financial stake, but a place at the table. You don't have to decide right away, Vanessa added quickly. Take your time. Review it with your own lawyer. I nodded, tucking the folder into my purse. I will, thank you. As we toured the rest of the boutique, with Vanessa eagerly showing me her sketches for additional pieces in the Eleanor collection, I felt a shift in our dynamic, a rebalancing that acknowledged my worth beyond my financial contributions. Later, as we prepared to leave, Vanessa hesitated, then hugged me awkwardly but sincerely. Thank you, she whispered, not just for the money, but for showing me what real class looks like. In the car, driving back to my house, Michael asked, What do you think about the partnership? I considered the question carefully. I think it's a genuine gesture, I replied, and I appreciate that. But I'll need time to decide if it's right for me. Being a formal partner is different from being an anonymous investor. He nodded. That makes sense. Just know that whatever you decide, things have changed. We see you now, Mom. Really see you. As we pulled into my driveway, I smiled. That's all I ever wanted. And it was true. The money, the business stake, the new collection bearing my name, all of it was meaningful, but secondary to the simple acknowledgement of my value as a person, not just as a provider. I didn't know what the future held for our family. Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. Patterns of behavior don't change overnight, but as I watched Michael's car disappear down the street, I felt hopeful for the first time in years. Not because my financial contributions had finally been acknowledged, but because my humanity had been. The next day, I received a large flower arrangement at my office. The card read simply, To Eleanor, thank you for everything. With love and respect, Vanessa. It wasn't the flowers themselves that touched me. It was the fact that they had been delivered to my workplace, a space that was mine, where I had built a career and an identity separate from my role as Michael's mother. It showed an awareness of me as a whole person, with a life beyond my relationship to my son and his wife. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with the partnership agreement spread before me, carefully reading through each clause. It was a generous offer, with better terms than I might have expected. But beyond the legal language and financial considerations, it represented something far more valuable. An acknowledgement of my contribution. A seat at the table rather than a place in the shadows. After much consideration, I signed the agreement. Not because I needed the formal recognition or the potential financial return, but because it represented a new chapter in our relationship, one built on mutual respect rather than unspoken obligation. 2 weeks later, the Eleanor collection launched at Vanessa's boutique. A photo of me, not as Michael's mother or Vanessa's investor, but as a woman in my own right, was displayed prominently alongside Vanessa's artist statement about the inspiration behind the collection. Women of all ages filled the space, many of them professional women in their 50s and 60s who had previously felt overlooked by high-end fashion. As I watched Vanessa confidently presenting her designs, occasionally glancing my way with genuine warmth, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought us to this point. It had taken harsh words overheard in a kitchen and a shocking revelation to break through the barriers between us. But perhaps that fracture had been necessary, a catalyst for growth and change that might not have happened otherwise. Michael appeared at my side, offering a glass of champagne. To new beginnings, he said quietly, touching his glass to mine. To seeing each other clearly, I amended, and he nodded in understanding. That evening, as the launch party wound down and the last guests departed, Vanessa approached me, her usual composed demeanor softened by genuine emotion. "This is just the beginning," she said, gesturing around the boutique. "Of the collection, yes, but also of us, of our family. I don't expect you to forgive me overnight for years of condescension, but I hope you know I'm committed to doing better." "I believe you," I replied simply, and was surprised to find that I meant it. Walking home that night, beneath a canopy of stars, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. For so long, I had been defined by what I could provide. To Michael, as a child, to Vanessa's business as an investor. Now, finally, I was being seen for who I was. Eleanor Wright, mother, professional, partner, woman. The path forward wouldn't be perfect or without its stumbles. Old patterns have a way of reasserting themselves, but something fundamental had shifted, a rebalancing of power and respect that gave me hope for the future of our family. In the end, it wasn't about the money I had provided or the business I now partially owned. It was about something far more valuable, the recognition of my inherent worth, my dignity, my humanity. And that, more than any financial investment, was the true gift I had given myself by finally speaking my truth. The success of the Eleanor collection exceeded everyone's expectations. In the months that followed, Vanessa Chen Designs expanded to a second location in the trendy arts district downtown. Fashion magazines featured the collection, praising its sophisticated simplicity and ageless elegance. Several prominent, professional women in the city became loyal customers, appreciating clothes that honored their accomplishments rather than attempting to disguise their years. My role as partner rather than silent investor brought new dimensions to my life. Twice a week, I visited the boutique after finishing at Harrington & Associates, offering input on business decisions and occasionally advising customers who appreciated fashion guidance from someone their own age. Vanessa and I developed a tentative working relationship that, while not yet warm, was built on growing mutual respect. Michael seemed relieved by this evolution, no longer caught between his wife and mother. He joined us for dinner every Sunday, a tradition we'd abandoned years earlier, when Vanessa had declared my cooking too heavy for her dietary preferences. Now, she not only came, but occasionally brought dessert or a bottle of wine, making an effort to contribute rather than critique. It was during one of these Sunday dinners, nearly 6 months after the night I'd revealed myself as her investor, that Vanessa made an unexpected announcement. "I've been thinking about expanding the business," she said, setting down her fork. "Not just another boutique, but something completely different." "Oh," I prompted, curious about this new direction. "A mentorship program for young designers from underprivileged backgrounds." Her eyes lit up with genuine enthusiasm. "Women who have talent, but lack the connections and financial resources to break into the industry." I studied her face, searching for signs that this was merely a calculated move to appear more generous or inclusive. Instead, I found authentic passion, something I rarely saw in Vanessa outside of discussions about her own designs. "That sounds wonderful," I said, meaning it. "What sparked this idea?" She hesitated, glancing at Michael before answering. "You did, Eleanor." My surprise must have shown on my face. "Working with you these past months has made me realize how narrow my vision was," she continued. "I was so focused on impressing people from my own privileged circle that I missed the bigger picture. Fashion shouldn't just be for the elite, and success shouldn't depend on having the right last name or going to the right school." Michael reached over to squeeze her hand, pride evident in his expression. "Vanessa's been researching funding, options and outreach programs. She's really serious about this. I'd like to use some of our profits to establish scholarships, Vanessa explained. Cover tuition for design school, materials, even living expenses for the most promising candidates. Then offer apprenticeships at our studio. It was perhaps the first time I'd heard Vanessa refer to the business as our rather than my or mine, a subtle but significant shift. That's a wonderful vision, I said, genuinely impressed by her evolution. I'd be happy to help develop the program. Vanessa smiled, a genuine expression rather than the polished smile she typically wore for clients in social media. I was hoping you would say that. Your experience at Harrington and Associates would be invaluable for structuring the financial aspects. I nodded, already considering how we might sustainably fund such a program. Let me put together some projections. We'll need to ensure the business can support both expansion and scholarship commitments. There's something else, Vanessa continued, her expression turning more serious. I've been thinking about the business name. When we launched the Eleanor collection, it was meant as a tribute to you. But now I'm wondering if we should consider something more permanent. Michael looked as surprised as I felt. What are you suggesting, honey? What about Wright and Chen Designs? She proposed, watching my reaction carefully. To acknowledge Eleanor's role not just as an investor, but as a true partner in building this company. I was momentarily speechless. After years of feeling invisible in my son's new life, here was his wife offering to put my name first on the business she had once jealously claimed as hers alone. That's quite a gesture, Vanessa, I finally managed. But are you sure? You've worked hard to establish the Vanessa Chen brand, which wouldn't exist without you, she said firmly. Not just because of the money, but because of everything I've learned from you about grace, dignity, and what true success looks like. It was perhaps the most genuine moment we'd ever shared, this acknowledgement of how our relationship had transformed from mutual tolerance to something approaching genuine respect. I'd be honored, I said simply, finding myself unexpectedly moved. Michael raised his glass. To Wright and Chen Designs, he toasted, and to second chances. We clinked glasses, the three of us bound in a moment of authentic connection that would have seemed impossible just 6 months earlier. After dinner, as Michael and Vanessa prepared to leave, she lingered in the doorway, an uncharacteristic hesitancy in her posture. Eleanor, she began, there's something else I wanted to ask you. For the mentorship program, would you consider being directly involved, not just on the financial side, but working with the young designers, sharing your perspective? My perspective on fashion? I asked, genuinely puzzled. I'm hardly qualified. Your perspective on perseverance, she clarified, on building something meaningful despite obstacles, on maintaining your dignity and values in a world that often dismisses both. She shook her head slightly. When we first met, I thought I had nothing to learn from you. Now I realize how much wisdom you have to offer, not just to me, but to young women starting out with none of the advantages I took for granted. It was perhaps the most genuine compliment she had ever paid me. An acknowledgement not of what I could provide materially, but of who I was as a person. I'd be happy to help, I said, touched by her request. As their car disappeared down the street, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought us to this point. 6 months ago, I had been the embarrassing mother-in-law who smelled like old people, someone to be tolerated rather than respected. Now I was a business partner, a mentor, a valued voice at the table. The transformation hadn't been instantaneous or without its awkward moments. There had been slips into old patterns, occasions when Vanessa's condescension resurfaced, or Michael momentarily forgot the new equilibrium we were building. But each time, corrections followed, sometimes with tense conversations, sometimes with simple apologies. always with a recommitment to the respectful relationship we were trying to create. 2 weeks later, I found myself in the conference room at Harrington and Associates, surrounded by spreadsheets and financial projections. Robert Harrington Jr. had generously offered the space for our planning session for the mentorship program, and had even assigned one of his associates to help develop the framework. "These numbers look solid," he commented, reviewing the documents spread across the table. "You've structured the funding model sustainably, with protections for both the business and the scholarship recipients." "Thank you," I replied, pleased by his assessment. I wanted to ensure we could maintain the program even during leaner business cycles. Robert gave me an appraising look. "You know, Eleanor, when you first told me about investing in your daughter-in-law's business, I had concerns. I've seen too many family financial arrangements end badly." He tapped the spreadsheets with approval. "But you've transformed what could have been a disaster into something remarkable." "Not just me," I corrected. "Vanessa has shown more growth than I ever expected. She's the one who proposed the mentorship program." "Based on your suggestion, I'd wager." I shook my head. "It came entirely from her. She's starting to see beyond her privileged bubble, to recognize talent and potential in unexpected places." Robert nodded thoughtfully, "Like someone once did for you." The comment took me by surprise. "What do you mean?" "My father," Robert clarified. "He saw something in you beyond your role as receptionist, recognized potential others might have overlooked because you were a single mother without a college degree." I smiled at the memory of the elder Harrington offering to pay for my accounting courses. He changed my life with that opportunity. And now you and Vanessa will do the same for others. Robert gathered his papers, preparing to leave. "It's a good legacy, Eleanor. One my father would have been proud to see." As he left, I remained in the conference room, reflecting on the parallels I hadn't fully appreciated until Robert pointed them out. My own journey from struggling single mother to respected professional had been made possible by someone who looked beyond superficial markers of status to see my potential. Now, in a strange twist of fate, my formerly elitist daughter-in-law was preparing to do the same for young designers who reminded me of my younger self. The irony wasn't lost on me. If Vanessa had known from the beginning that I was funding her business, would she have treated me differently? Almost certainly. But would that respect have been genuine, or merely a calculated response to my financial leverage? By keeping my investment secret, I had given her the opportunity to reveal her true character, flawed and initially dismissive, yes, but ultimately capable of growth and genuine remorse. The launch of Wright & Chen Designs and its accompanying mentorship program occurred on a crisp autumn evening, exactly 1 year after I had overheard Vanessa's cruel comment in her kitchen. The symmetry of the timing wasn't lost on me as I stood beside her at the podium, addressing the crowd of fashion journalists, industry insiders, and prospective mentees who had gathered for the announcement. "Fashion has traditionally been an exclusive industry," Vanessa was saying, her usual polished delivery infused with unexpected warmth. "Access often depends on connections, family names, or financial resources. Today, we're committing to changing that paradigm." She outlined the scholarship program, explaining how it would provide not just financial support, but mentorship, internship opportunities, and eventual job placement for promising designers from underprivileged backgrounds. "None of this would be possible without my partner, Eleanor Wright," she continued, gesturing toward me. "When I started this business 3 years ago, Eleanor believed in my vision enough to become my anonymous investor. Today, she stands beside me as an equal partner and the inspiration behind our most successful collection." The crowd applauded politely, several journalists scribbling notes about this unexpected business partnership between the young fashion designer and the middle-aged bookkeeper. What they couldn't know, what no press release could adequately capture, was the complex journey that had brought us to this moment. The hurt, the revelation, the painful reckoning, and the gradual rebuilding of a relationship on a foundation of mutual respect, rather than financial dependence. After the formal presentation, as guests mingled and examined display boards showing the mentorship program structure, a young woman approached me hesitantly. She couldn't have been more than 20, dressed simply but with an attention to detail that spoke of creativity working within limited means. "Ms. Wright?" she began, her voice soft. "I wanted to thank you for this opportunity. I've been designing since I was 12, making clothes for my sisters out of thrift store finds, but design school seemed like an impossible dream." I smiled encouragingly. "What's your name?" "Maya Rodriguez," she replied. "I work at a dry cleaner to pay rent, but at night I sketch and sew. When I heard about this program..." She gestured toward the displays. "It feels like someone finally seeing people like me." "That's exactly what it's meant to do," I assured her. "Talent doesn't belong exclusively to those who can afford expensive educations." She nodded eagerly. "Ms. Chen said you started with nothing too, that you worked multiple jobs to support your son while building your career. It's inspiring to know success doesn't always follow a straight line." I was surprised that Vanessa had shared my story with the prospective mentees. It suggested she had truly begun to value my journey rather than dismissing it as embarrassingly working class. "The path is rarely straight," I agreed. "But persistence matters more than pedigree. Remember that when things get difficult." Maya thanked me, again before moving on to speak with one of the program coordinators. As I watched her, I saw echoes of my younger self. Determined, resourceful, unwilling to let circumstances dictate her potential. Later that evening, as the event wound down, Michael appeared at my side, offering a glass of champagne. "You should be proud, Mom. This program is going to change lives." "I am proud," I admitted, "not just of the program, but of how far we've all come this past year." He nodded, understanding the deeper meaning behind my words. "Vanessa and I were talking about that last night, about how sometimes the hardest lessons lead to the most important growth." "Speaking of Vanessa," I said, glancing around, "where is she?" Michael pointed toward a corner of the room where his wife was engaged in animated conversation with Maya Rodriguez and two other young designers, her usual poised reserve replaced by genuine enthusiasm. "She's in her element," I observed, "but not in the way I would have expected a year ago." "She's changed," Michael said simply. "We both have." Watching her work with these kids, seeing how much it means to her to pass along what she knows. It's like she's finally found purpose beyond just success. As if sensing our attention, Vanessa looked up and caught my eye across the room. She smiled, not her practiced social smile, but something more genuine, and gave me a small nod of appreciation before returning to her conversation. It struck me then how profoundly our relationship had evolved, from mutual tolerance to grudging respect to genuine partnership. It hadn't been a smooth journey, and there had been moments when I'd questioned whether the hurt could ever be fully healed. But standing in that room, witnessing the tangible result of our combined vision, I felt a sense of resolution I hadn't thought possible. The mentorship program's first year exceeded all expectations. 12 young designers received full scholarships to attend design school while participating in weekend workshops at the Wright and Chen studio. Their fresh perspectives and diverse backgrounds brought new energy to the company, challenging established assumptions and inspiring collections that appealed to broader markets. Maya Rodriguez proved particularly talented, her designs reflecting both technical skill and a unique aesthetic sensibility drawn from her Mexican-American heritage. By the end of the year, 2 of her pieces had been incorporated into the main collection, earning her a stipend and professional credit, an unprecedented opportunity for a student still in her first year of training. The business expanded accordingly, with a 3rd boutique opening in an emerging arts district and online sales increasing by 60%. Fashion publications that had once described Vanessa Chen designs as promising but predictable now praised. Raiden Chen for its innovative inclusivity and refreshing authenticity. For my part, I gradually reduced my hours at Harrington and Associates to focus more on the mentorship program, finding unexpected fulfillment in guiding young creatives who reminded me of my younger self. Robert Harrington Jr. supported this transition, even offering the firm's services pro bono to establish a proper nonprofit foundation to expand the scholarship offerings. My relationship with Vanessa continued to evolve in ways neither of us could have anticipated. The woman who had once dismissed me as embarrassingly old-fashioned now regularly sought my advice, not just on business matters but on navigating professional relationships and maintaining perspective amid success. "How did you do it?" she asked one evening as we worked late in the studio, finalizing selections for the upcoming season. "Raise a child alone, build a career, save enough to invest in my business, all without becoming bitter about the sacrifices?" I considered the question carefully. I don't think I avoided bitterness entirely, I admitted. There were nights I cried from exhaustion, days I resented how much harder I had to work compared to parents with more resources. I met her gaze directly. But I chose to focus on building rather than blaming, on what I could create rather than what I lacked. Vanessa nodded slowly. "That's what I'm trying to learn. My parents gave me every advantage, but also this constant sense that I was entitled to success, that obstacles were somehow unfair rather than just part of life." It was perhaps the most self-aware comment I'd ever heard from her, an acknowledgement of the privileged lens through which she had viewed the world. "The mentorship program is changing that perspective," I observed. "I see it every time you work with Maya and the others." "They amaze me," Vanessa said, genuine admiration in her voice. "What they create with such limited resources, the determination, they show despite everything stacked against them." She arranged fabric swatches with careful precision. I think about how I complained when my first sewing machine wasn't the top model, and then I see Maya creating gorgeous pieces on a second-hand machine she repairs herself. Perspective is a powerful teacher, I agreed. She glanced up, her expression unusually vulnerable. "I've been thinking a lot about what you overheard that night, what I said about you. It still makes me sick with shame." "We've moved past that," I said, meaning it. "Have we? Truly?" She set down the fabric samples. "Because sometimes I worry that no matter what I do now, that moment will always define me in your eyes, that you'll always see me as that entitled, judgmental person." I considered her words carefully, appreciating the genuine concern behind them. People are more than their worst moments, Vanessa. Just as they're more than their best. You said something cruel and dismissive that night, yes. But you've spent the past year showing me who you're capable of becoming. She blinked rapidly, emotion briefly overwhelming her usual composure. "Thank you for that, for seeing the possibility of change rather than defining me by my mistakes." It was a moment of authentic connection, not as business partners or reluctant family members, but as two women acknowledging each other's full humanity, flaws and growth and all. A few weeks later, Michael invited me to lunch, just the two of us, something that hadn't happened often since his marriage. We met at a small cafe near my office, the kind of unpretentious place we used to frequent before his social circle expanded to include Vanessa's wealthy friends. "This place still makes the best club sandwich in town," he said appreciatively after ordering. "Some things don't need upgrading," I replied with a smile, remembering how we used to come here to celebrate small victories, a good report card, a promotion at work. He nodded, a hint of wistfulness in his expression. "I miss this sometimes. The simplicity of our life before." "Before you married up?" I suggested gently. He had the grace to look embarrassed. "That's how I saw it at first, like I'd somehow graduated to a better level of existence." He shook his head. "Pretty shallow, looking back." "Youth and love often are," I said without judgment. "You were infatuated not just with Vanessa, but with her whole world. It's natural to be dazzled by things that seem exclusive or elite when you haven't experienced them before. But I let it change how I saw you, he acknowledged, discomfort evident in his expression, started measuring you against standards that never should have mattered. I reached across the table to squeeze his hand briefly. We're finding our way back to something authentic. That's what matters now. He nodded, seemingly relieved by my lack of recrimination. Vanessa and I have been talking a lot lately about family, about priorities, about the kind of home we want to create. Something in his tone caught my attention. Oh? We're thinking about starting a family, he said, a mix of excitement and apprehension in his voice. Actually, more than thinking, Vanessa is pregnant, 8 weeks along. Joy surged through me, pure, uncomplicated happiness at the prospect of a grandchild. Michael, that's wonderful news. He smiled, relief evident in his expression. We wanted to tell you first, before anyone else. The significance of that decision wasn't lost on me. A year ago, I would likely have been among the last to know, after Vanessa's parents and friends. Thank you for that, I said, genuinely touched. I'm thrilled for you both. There's more, he continued, an unusual hesitancy in his manner. We've been talking about childcare arrangements, about how we want to raise our child. I waited, sensing there was more to this conversation than general parenting philosophy. Vanessa's mother offered to pay for a full-time nanny, he explained. She thinks that's the only reasonable option given our careers and lifestyle. I nodded, unsurprised by Olivia Chen's perspective. That's certainly common in their social circle. But it's not what we want, Michael continued, his voice firmer now. At least, not exclusively. I raised an eyebrow, curious where this was heading. Mom, he said, leaning forward slightly, we'd like you to be a regular part of our child's life, not just for occasional visits, but involved in a meaningful way. If you're willing, we thought maybe you could care for the baby 2 or 3 days, a week once Vanessa returns to work. The request took me completely by surprise. After years of being gradually marginalized in my son's life, being invited to play such a significant role in my grandchild's upbringing felt like the most profound gesture of trust imaginable. We understand it's a big ask, Michael added quickly, misinterpreting my silence. You have your own career, your work with the mentorship program. We don't want to presume. I'd be honored, I interrupted, emotion making my voice slightly unsteady. Truly honored. Relief and happiness spread across his face. Really? You'll do it? Of course, I said without hesitation. Nothing would make me happier. Vanessa was worried you might refuse, he admitted. After everything, she thought you might not want to be that closely involved with our family. I shook my head, smiling at the irony. A year ago, the idea of Vanessa wanting me to care for her child would have seemed impossible. Now it feels like the most natural thing in the world. A lot can change in a year, Michael agreed, his expression thoughtful. Remember last Thanksgiving? How awkward it was with Vanessa's parents treating you like some distant acquaintance rather than family? I remembered it vividly. The stiff politeness, the careful steering of conversation away from topics that might highlight our different backgrounds. The subtle ways Olivia Chen had established her dominance as the real maternal figure in Michael's life. Olivia and Dr. Chen are going to be surprised by our childcare decision, Michael continued, a hint of defiance in his tone. They have very definite ideas about how their grandchild should be raised. Private nannies, elite preschools, the whole prescribed path they believe leads to success. And you're choosing a different path, I observed. He nodded firmly. We want our child to understand there are many forms of success, many types of valuable experience. To learn from someone who built a meaningful life through hard work and resilience, not just inherited privilege. It was perhaps the most profound compliment my son had ever paid me, an acknowledgement not just of my financial contributions or practical support, but of the values my life embodied. Vanessa feels even more strongly about this than I do, he added, surprising me further. She says she doesn't want our child growing up with the same blind spots and prejudices she had. She wants them to see worth in people regardless of social, status, or background. I blinked back unexpected tears, moved by this evidence of Vanessa's transformation. The woman who had once dismissed me as embarrassingly old-fashioned now wanted me to help shape her child's values and worldview. "What about your career?" Michael asked, concern evident in his expression. "I know how important the mentorship program is to you. We don't want to pull you away from that." "We'll make it work," I assured him. "The program is well established now, with solid systems in place. I can coordinate my schedule to balance both responsibilities." As we finished our lunch, discussing logistics and nursery plans, I felt a profound sense of coming full circle. My journey as a mother had begun in this same modest cafe, where I'd once sat with baby Michael in a secondhand high chair, counting pennies to make sure I could afford our meal. Now here we were, planning for the next generation, our relationship transformed but ultimately strengthened by the difficult truth we had faced together. When the bill came, Michael reached for it automatically, but I gently intercepted it. "My treat," I said, in celebration of my future grandchild. He started to protest, then stopped, understanding this wasn't about the money. It was about acknowledging that I could contribute in ways both large and small, that I had always been capable of more than he or Vanessa had recognized. As we walked out together, Michael put his arm around my shoulders in a casual half-hug. "You know, Mom, for all the fancy restaurants and exclusive places Vanessa's family introduced me to, nothing beats this cafe with you." "It's not about the place," I replied, returning the hug. "It's about seeing each other clearly. That's something we lost for a while, but I think we've found it again." "We have," he agreed, "and we're not going to lose it again." Walking. Back to my office in the gentle autumn sunshine, I reflected on the strange, winding path that had led us to this moment. The hurt of overhearing Vanessa's cruel comment had seemed insurmountable at the time, a betrayal too profound to move past. Yet that painful moment had ultimately catalyzed a transformation none of us could have anticipated. By revealing myself as the anonymous investor behind Vanessa's success, I had reclaimed not just recognition for my financial contribution, but something far more valuable: acknowledgement of my inherent worth as a person, regardless of social status or background. And now, a year later, I was being invited into the heart of their family life, entrusted with helping shape the values and experiences of the next generation. It was a profound gesture of respect and inclusion, one that acknowledged the wisdom earned through my journey rather than dismissing it as irrelevant in their more privileged world. As I reached my office building, my phone chimed with a text from Vanessa. "Michael told you our news? Dinner at our place tonight to celebrate? I'm making your chicken recipe, the one you taught me last month." I smiled at this small but significant gesture, Vanessa preparing a dish I had taught her, rather than insisting on showcasing her own culinary education or ordering from the exclusive restaurants she once preferred. "I'll be there," I replied. "And Vanessa, I'm truly happy for you both." Her response came quickly. "Thank you, Eleanor, for everything. We wouldn't be where we are, as a business or as a family, without you." Reading those words, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The journey hadn't been easy, and there would undoubtedly be challenges ahead as we navigated new roles and relationships. But we had built something authentic from the ashes of misunderstanding and hurt, a foundation of mutual respect that could support whatever came next. Sometimes the most painful revelations lead to the most meaningful transformations. My son's wife had once said I smelled like old people and tried to push me out of their lives. Now she was welcoming me into the heart of their family, recognizing that the wisdom of experience was a gift rather than an embarrassment. It wasn't about the money I had provided in the end. It was about seeing each other's true worth, beyond superficial markers of status or success. And in that recognition, we had all found something far more valuable than financial investment: the authentic connection that comes from honoring each other's full humanity. As I settled at my desk to review the day's appointments, I smiled at the framed photo that now held pride of place beside my computer. The three of us at the launch of Wright & Chen Designs, arms linked, faces alight with shared purpose and genuine connection. It was a visual reminder of how far we had come, and the unexpected gifts that can emerge from even the most painful truths when faced with courage and grace. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had led us to something authentic and enduring, a family bond strengthened rather than weakened by confronting difficult truths. And in the end, that was worth more than all the financial investments in the world. 6 months later, I stood in what had once been my home office, now transformed into a nursery painted in soft sage green. The crib, crafted from sustainable bamboo, a compromise between Vanessa's aesthetic preferences and my practical concerns about durability, stood beneath the window where morning light would gently filter through organic cotton curtains. "What do you think?" Michael asked, putting the finishing touches on a mobile of handcrafted woodland creatures suspended above the crib. "Too much? Not enough?" I smiled, running my hand over the changing table stocked with cloth diapers and eco-friendly supplies. "It's perfect. Just the right balance." The nursery, like so much in our lives now, represented a thoughtful fusion of different values and perspectives. Where once Vanessa would have insisted on only the most expensive designer baby items, regardless of practicality, now she carefully considered both aesthetics and function. Where once I might have prioritized cost and utility above all else, I now appreciated the value of beauty and thoughtful design. "The rocking chair gets delivered tomorrow," Michael said, adjusting a framed illustration of a mother bear with her cub. "Vanessa insisted it should be here before the baby shower. She wants everything ready for you." The chair, an ergonomic glider in buttery soft leather, had been Vanessa's specific request. "For when Eleanor's here with the baby," she had explained, when selecting it. "She needs to be comfortable for those long afternoons." It was one of countless small gestures that continued to surprise me, evidence of how thoroughly our relationship had transformed over the past 18 months. The woman who had once considered me an embarrassing burden now actively created space for me in their home and lives. "How is she feeling today?" I asked, arranging stuffed animals on a shelf. "Tired but excited," Michael replied. "The doctor says everything looks perfect. 6 more weeks until we meet little Thomas." Thomas Robert Wright Chen, named for Michael's grandfather, Vanessa's father, and carrying my surname as one of his middle names. The naming had been Vanessa's suggestion, a meaningful acknowledgement of my place in their family. Her parents are coming for dinner tonight, Michael added, his tone carefully neutral. I nodded, understanding the complexity behind his words. Dr. and Mrs. Chen had been adjusting to the evolving dynamic between their daughter and me. After years of subtly reinforcing class distinctions and encouraging Vanessa to distance herself from her working-class in-laws, namely me, they now found themselves navigating a very different reality. One where I was not only Vanessa's business partner, but soon to be a primary caregiver for their grandchild. "Will you stay?" Michael asked. "Vanessa would love to have you there." 18 months ago, such an invitation would have been unthinkable. A dinner with both sets of grandparents would have excluded me or reduced me to an awkward afterthought. But much had changed. "Of course," I agreed. "I'll help with the cooking." Later that evening, I worked alongside Vanessa in her kitchen, preparing a meal that bridged our different culinary backgrounds: her mother's famous Taiwanese beef noodle, soup alongside my homemade sourdough bread. As we worked, Vanessa moved more slowly than usual, her advanced pregnancy making her movements deliberate. "Can you check the broth?" she asked, resting one hand on her lower back. "I think it needs more star anise." I tasted it, considering. The balance of flavors. "Perfect as is," I assured her. "Your mother will be impressed." Vanessa smiled wryly. "She'll find something to critique. She always does." She arranged scallions on a serving plate with practiced precision. But it matters less now. Her approval isn't as important as it used to be. It was a striking admission from someone who had once oriented her entire life around meeting her parents' exacting standards and expectations. Meeting you where you are, rather than where they want you to be, that's an adjustment for them, I observed, keeping my tone neutral. Vanessa nodded, thoughtful. They still don't quite understand our partnership, or why I'd want my mother-in-law so involved with the baby. She glanced at me, her expression softening. They measure value differently than I do now. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang, announcing the Chen's arrival. Michael ushered them in, accepting the expensive champagne and elaborately wrapped gifts they carried. Dr. Chen greeted me with polite reserve, his handshake firm but brief. Olivia Chen air-kissed my cheeks, her gaze sweeping over me with the faintest hint of appraisal, noting my simple linen dress and minimal jewelry. "Eleanor," she said, her voice carrying that precise tone of upper-class condescension masked as warmth. "How lovely to see you. Vanessa tells me you've been quite involved with the nursery preparations." "Mom," Vanessa interjected before I could respond. "Eleanor isn't just involved. She's going to be Thomas's primary caregiver 3 days a week when I return to work." Olivia's perfectly composed expression flickered momentarily. "Oh, I thought we had discussed hiring Mrs. Liu's daughter. She trained at the Norland College in London, you know. The same program that prepares nannies for the royal family." "We've decided on a different arrangement," Vanessa replied firmly. "Eleanor has more wisdom and experience than any professionally trained nanny could offer." Dr. Chen cleared his throat. "Darling, I'm sure Eleanor has many fine qualities, but childcare has evolved considerably since her day. Modern developmental approaches, early language acquisition strategies, all of which Eleanor is studying," Michael interrupted smoothly. "She's taking early childhood development courses and working with a pediatric specialist to ensure her approach aligns with current best practices. I hadn't told them about the courses. I'd been taking them quietly on my own initiative. Michael's awareness and defense touched me deeply." "That's commendable," Dr. Chen conceded, though his tone suggested skepticism. Vanessa met my eyes. Across the room, a silent apology in her expression. I gave her a small smile in return. Their parents' disapproval no longer had the power to diminish me. I knew my worth now, not just as a provider or a grandmother-to-be, but as a woman who had earned her place at this table through the strength of her character and the wisdom of her experience. Dinner progressed with the careful politeness that characterized most gatherings with the Chens. Conversation flowed more easily once it turned to the upcoming expansion of Wright and Chen designs into international markets, prompted by interest from luxury retailers in Tokyo and Paris. "The Eleanor collection continues to be our strongest line," Vanessa explained, serving her father another portion of noodles. "We're developing new pieces specifically for the Japanese market, with adjustments for different body types and aesthetic preferences." "And the mentorship program?" Dr. Chen inquired, his interest seemingly genuine. "Is that expanding as well?" "Absolutely," I replied. "We've partnered with design schools in 3 additional cities. Next year's cohort will include 24 students, double our current number." "That Maya Girls' designs were featured in Fashion Forward last month," Olivia remarked, naming a prestigious industry publication. "Quite an accomplishment for someone from her background." The slight pause spoke volumes about her continued class consciousness, but I chose to focus on the acknowledgement rather than the qualification. Maya's talent transcends her circumstances, I said simply. That's the entire premise of our program, that creativity and vision aren't limited to those with financial advantages. Olivia's lips tightened slightly, but she nodded. An admirable philosophy. After dinner, as Michael and Dr. Chen discussed economic trends in the fashion industry, Vanessa led her mother and me to the nursery for a formal tour. I hung back, slightly, allowing Vanessa to showcase the thoughtfully designed space. Olivia inspected everything with a critical eye, trailing manicured fingers over the organic cotton bedding and sustainable furniture. "It's charming," she pronounced finally. "Though I still think you should consider the Bellini crib I showed you. It's what the Vanderbilt grandchildren sleep in." "This one is perfect, Mom," Vanessa replied firmly. "Eleanor helped me research the safest, most environmentally responsible options, and it converts to a toddler bed when Thomas is ready." Olivia's gaze shifted to me, something unreadable flickering in her expression. "You seem to have quite an influence on my daughter these days, Eleanor." "We influence each other," I corrected, gently. "That's what partnerships are about, each bringing different strengths to the table." She adjusted an already perfectly positioned stuffed animal. "And this arrangement, with you caring for the baby several days a week? You're certain it won't interfere with your business responsibilities?" "We've worked it all out," Vanessa answered before I could. "The boutique is closed Mondays and Tuesdays, which will be 2 of Eleanor's days with Thomas, and she'll bring him to the studio on Thursdays when we're doing administrative work rather than client meetings." "Very practical," Olivia murmured, in a tone suggesting practicality ranked somewhere below elegance and status in her hierarchy of values. "Though I still think a professional nanny would provide more structure and consistency." I remained silent, recognizing this for what it was. Not a critique of my capabilities, but Olivia's struggle to accept her diminished influence in her daughter's life. For years, she had been Vanessa's primary advisor and role model. Now she found herself sharing that position with a woman she had once dismissed as irrelevant. "Mom," Vanessa said quietly but firmly, "Eleanor is family. Thomas is her grandchild, too. This isn't about professional credentials. It's about love and connection. Thomas will have plenty of structured learning opportunities as he grows. What he needs in his earliest years is consistent, loving care from people who adore him." Olivia blinked, seemingly taken aback by her daughter's directness. "Well, I suppose there's something to be said for the traditional approach." It wasn't exactly a ringing endorsement, but it was a concession. Perhaps the most we could expect from a woman who had built her identity around social status and external validation. Later, after the Chens had departed with promises to return for the baby shower the following weekend, Vanessa sank onto the sofa with a sigh of relief. "That went better than I expected," she admitted, kicking off her shoes and propping her swollen feet on a cushion. Michael brought her a cup of herbal tea. "Your mother only made 3 passive-aggressive comments about Eleanor's involvement. A new record." I laughed, appreciating his attempt to lighten the mood. "She's trying. It's a big adjustment for her." "It shouldn't be," Vanessa said, frustration evident in her voice. "She should be grateful that Thomas will have so much love in his life, so many people who care about him." "She'll get there," I reassured her. "It took us time to find our way to mutual respect. Give her the same grace." Vanessa reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. "When did you become so wise about my mother?" "Wisdom comes from unexpected places," I replied with a smile. "Something you've learned these past 18 months, I think." She nodded, her expression thoughtful. "The most valuable lessons often come from sources we initially discount." Another thing I've learned from you. As I prepared to leave, gathering my purse and the notes for tomorrow's meeting with our Tokyo representatives, Vanessa called me back. Eleanor, wait. There's something I've been meaning to give you. She disappeared into their home office, returning with a small, elegantly wrapped package. I was saving this for your birthday next month, but now seems right. Inside was a sterling silver frame containing a professional photograph of the three of us at the opening of our Paris pop-up shop 6 months earlier. We stood arm in arm, Vanessa's pregnancy just beginning to show, all of us radiating the quiet confidence of people who had found their place in the world and with each other. Engraved along the bottom edge were the words, "Family is where respect grows, with love and gratitude." "It's beautiful," I said, genuinely touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "I have the same photo on my desk at the studio," Vanessa explained. "Sometimes when things get hectic or challenging, I look at it and remember how far we've come, how much we've learned from each other." It was perhaps the most genuine moment we had shared, an acknowledgement not just of our professional partnership or familial connection, but of the deeper bonds we had forged through conflict, resolution, and mutual growth. On my drive home, I reflected on the strange, circuitous path that had brought us to this point. 18 months ago, I had stood frozen in Vanessa's kitchen, knife suspended over chopping board, as I overheard her cruel dismissal. That moment of pain had become a catalyst for transformation, not just in how she and Michael treated me, but in how I advocated for my own worth and dignity. By revealing myself as the anonymous investor behind Vanessa's success, I had forced a reckoning that might never have come otherwise. Not to punish or humiliate, but to establish truth as the foundation for whatever relationship we might build moving forward. Thomas Robert Wright Chen arrived 2 weeks early, on a blustery March morning that had rain lashing against the hospital windows. I was at a fabric supplier meeting when Michael's call came, his voice breathless with excitement and anxiety. "Mom, it's happening. Vanessa's water broke at the studio. We're headed to the hospital now." "I'm on my way," I promised, gathering my things as the supplier nodded understanding. By the time I arrived, Vanessa was already in the delivery room, Michael by her side. Dr. and Mrs. Chen sat in the waiting area, tension evident in their posture. Olivia's perfectly manicured nails tapped an anxious rhythm on her designer handbag. Dr. Chen scrolled through his phone with uncharacteristic distraction. "Eleanor," Olivia acknowledged me with a nod that was almost warm. "Have you heard anything?" "Not yet," I replied, settling into a chair across from them. "But first babies often take their time." Dr. Chen glanced up from his phone. "Vanessa was born within 3 hours of Olivia's first contraction. Very efficient even then." It was as close to a joke as I'd ever heard from the serious surgeon, and I smiled in response. Michael took nearly 20 hours. I had time to finish a tea novel between contractions. A nurse appeared in the doorway. "Mrs. Wright, Ms. Chen asked for you." Olivia half rose from her seat, then realized the nurse was addressing me. A flicker of something, disappointment, resentment, crossed her features before she composed herself. Of course. Vanessa would want both of her mothers there. It was the first time she had acknowledged, even obliquely, that I held a maternal role in Vanessa's life. Progress, however small. "I'll let you know how she's doing," I promised, following the nurse through swinging doors. In the delivery room, Vanessa lay propped against pillows, her face flushed with exertion, hair dampened with sweat. Michael stood beside her, his expression a mix of awe and concern as he applied cool compresses to her forehead. "Eleanor," Vanessa breathed, reaching out her hand. "You made it." "Wouldn't miss it for the world," I assured her, taking her outstretched hand. "I wanted to ask," she began, then paused as another contraction built. She breathed through it with focused determination before continuing. Would you stay? For the delivery? I'd like both of you here. Tears pricked at my eyes, unexpected emotion rising in my throat. Are you sure? Your mother will understand, Vanessa finished. This is my choice. Our family. I looked to Michael, who nodded encouragement. Of course I'll stay. For the next 4 hours, I stood alongside Michael, supporting Vanessa, through increasingly intense contractions. I murmured encouragement, wiped her brow, reminded her to breathe when pain threatened to overwhelm her focus. When the moment of delivery approached, I stepped back slightly, allowing Michael the primary position beside his wife, but keeping my hand on her shoulder, a tangible reminder of my presence and support. Thomas entered the world with a robust cry, his tiny body perfect in every detail. As the doctor placed him on Vanessa's chest, her tears mingled with exhausted laughter. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We've been waiting for you." Michael bent to kiss his son's damp head, his own eyes glistening. "He's incredible," he murmured. "Perfect." After a few minutes of this sacred family bonding, Vanessa looked up at me, still standing slightly apart. "Eleanor," she said softly, "come meet your grandson." I moved closer, gazing down at the miracle of new life emerging from our once broken family bonds. Thomas blinked up at me with unfocused eyes, his tiny hand curling reflexively around my offered finger. "Hello, Thomas," I whispered. "I'm your grandmother, and I have so much to teach you about what really matters in this world." Later, after Thomas had been cleaned, measured, and swaddled, after initial feeding attempts and the first round of visitors, the Chens entering the room with expensive flowers and designer baby gifts, but also genuine joy and warmth, I prepared to leave, wanting to give the new parents space to absorb the momentous change in their lives. "Wait," Vanessa called as I gathered my things. "Before you go." She gestured for Michael to bring Thomas to her, then carefully adjusted her position in the hospital bed. "Would you take a photo of us? All 4 of us together?" It was a small request, but deeply meaningful. An acknowledgement that our family unit now transcended old boundaries and hurts. Michael handed his phone to a passing nurse, who cheerfully agreed to capture the moment. I positioned myself beside Vanessa's bed, leaning in slightly as she cradled Thomas. Michael stood on her other side, his arm extending protectively around his wife and child. Just before the nurse took the photo, Vanessa reached up to grasp my hand, pulling it into the frame where it rested lightly on Thomas's swaddled form. "Perfect," the nurse declared, returning Michael's phone. "A beautiful family. A beautiful family, not perfect or without its complexities, but bound together by something stronger than hurt or misunderstanding. The courage to face difficult truths and the grace to build something new from their ashes." The first 6 weeks of Thomas's life passed in a blur of middle-of-the-night feedings, pediatrician appointments, and the countless small adjustments that accompany a new baby's arrival. True to our agreement, I cared for Thomas 3 days a week once Vanessa returned to limited work hours, treasuring this opportunity to bond with my grandson while supporting my son and daughter-in-law's careers. Contrary to Olivia Chen's dire predictions about my outdated childcare approaches, I integrated contemporary developmental practices with the wisdom of experience. I sang to Thomas in both English and Mandarin, learned through an online course I'd taken specifically to connect with his Chinese heritage, narrated our daily activities to support language development, and incorporated the skin-to-skin contact recommended by current research. One afternoon, as I gently rocked Thomas after his feeding, the studio door opened to reveal an unexpected visitor. Olivia Chen, immaculately dressed and carrying a small gift bag. "Eleanor," she greeted me, her tone less imperious than usual. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all," I replied, genuinely welcoming. "Thomas just finished eating. Would you like to hold him?" She hesitated only briefly before nodding, setting down her purse and accepting her sleeping grandson with practiced ease. "He has Robert's nose," she observed, "and Vanessa's eyebrows. And Michael's chin," I added. "He's a perfect blend of everyone." Olivia settled into the rocking chair I had vacated, studying Thomas's peaceful face with undisguised adoration. For several minutes, we existed in companionable silence, unified by shared love for this tiny new person. "I brought something," she said finally, nodding toward the gift bag. "For Thomas, but also for you." Curious, I opened the bag to find a beautifully bound album. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, documenting Vanessa's childhood from infancy through adolescence. School plays, dance recitals, family vacations, everyday moments captured and preserved with obvious care. "I thought you might like to know her story," Olivia explained, her gaze still on Thomas. "To understand where she comes from, who she was before Michael." It was perhaps the most generous gesture she had ever made toward me, an inclusion in Vanessa's history that acknowledged my place in her future. "Thank you," I said, genuinely moved by the gesture. "This means a great deal to me." "She's changed," Olivia observed after another moment of silence. "Vanessa. Since meeting you, truly meeting you, I mean. Seeing you as you are rather than as she assumed you were." "We've all changed," I replied. "That's what happens when we allow ourselves to really see each other." She nodded, a thoughtful expression crossing her features. "I've been reflecting on our first interactions after Michael and Vanessa began dating. I wasn't welcoming." "You were protective of your daughter," I said, offering the grace I had learned through my own journey. "You wanted the best for her." "I defined best too narrowly," Olivia admitted, surprising me with her candor. "Status, connections, appearances, these seemed paramount. I didn't recognize other forms of wealth, other types of value." She adjusted Thomas's blanket with gentle precision. "Watching you with him these past weeks, it's clear you have wisdom I lack, a different kind of riches to offer." Coming from Olivia Chen, with her emphasis on external markers of success and status, this acknowledgement was extraordinary, a recognition that true value transcends financial wealth or social position. "Perhaps we can learn from each other," I suggested, each bringing different gifts to Thomas's life. She considered this, then nodded. "I would like that." As she prepared to leave an hour later, having spent time simply holding Thomas and sharing stories of Vanessa's childhood, Olivia paused at the door. "Eleanor," she said, uncharacteristic hesitation in her voice. "I've been meaning to ask. Those chicken dumplings you made for Thomas's 1-month celebration. Vanessa mentioned you learned the recipe specifically because of its significance in Chinese culture." "I did," I confirmed. "I wanted Thomas to grow up honoring both sides of his heritage. Would you be willing to teach me how to make your sourdough bread?" she asked, the request clearly costing her some pride. "Robert has become quite fond of it." I smiled, recognizing this for what it was. Not just a culinary inquiry, but an opening, an extension of tentative respect from a woman who had once viewed me as irrevocably beneath her. "I'd be happy to," I replied. "Why don't you come over next Tuesday when Thomas is napping? We can start a starter for you to take home." She nodded, a small but genuine smile softening her usually composed features. "Tuesday, then." As she departed, I looked down at the photo album she had brought. This tangible connection to Vanessa's past, offered as a bridge to our shared future. It symbolized something profound, the recognition that our differences in background and experience could enrich rather than divide our extended family. Later that week, during a rare quiet moment at the Wright & Chen studio, Vanessa found me organizing spring fabric samples while Thomas slept peacefully in his bassinet nearby. Mom mentioned she visited you yesterday, she said, settling into a chair across from me. She did, I confirmed. She brought a beautiful album of your childhood photos. Vanessa looked surprised. Those albums are practically sacred objects to her. She doesn't even let her sisters handle them without cotton gloves. It was a generous gesture, I agreed. And we had a nice conversation. She's coming over next week for a bread-making lesson. Vanessa's eyebrows rose even higher. My mother? Learning to bake? The woman who hasn't turned on her own oven in 20 years? I laughed softly. People can surprise us when given the chance. They certainly can, Vanessa agreed, her expression growing more serious. Like you surprised? Me, Eleanor. When I thought you were just Michael's embarrassing mother from a working-class background, I missed seeing the extraordinary woman you actually are. And like you surprised me, I countered gently. When I thought you were just a privileged, elitist daughter-in-law, I missed seeing your capacity for growth and genuine remorse. She nodded, acknowledgement of our mutual misjudgments. I think about that night sometimes, when you overheard me say you smelled like old people. How different our lives would be if you hadn't been in the kitchen at that exact moment. Or if I had simply swallowed the hurt and continued as before, I added. I'm glad you didn't, Vanessa said softly. As painful as that confrontation was, it broke something open between us, created space for something authentic to grow. Thomas stirred in his bassinet, making the small snuffling sounds that typically preceded waking. Both of us turned toward him automatically, this tiny person who had become the center of our shared world. I want him to know your story, Vanessa said as I lifted him into my arms. Not just the sanitized version, but the real journey. How hard you worked, how much you sacrificed, how you built a life of dignity and purpose despite every obstacle. I cradled Thomas against my shoulder, his warm weight a tangible reminder of life's continuing cycles. Stories are important, I agreed. They help us understand where we come from and who we might become. And I want him to know our story, she continued. How we moved from judgment to understanding, from dismissal to respect. It's a lesson I hope he carries with him, that true worth isn't about status or background, but about character and actions. As Thomas settled against me, his tiny hand curling around a strand of my hair, I reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought us to this moment. 18 months earlier, I had stood in Vanessa's kitchen, knife suspended in midair, as I overheard words that cut deeper than any blade. Now here we were, bound together not just by Michael and Thomas, but by genuine mutual respect and hard-won understanding. Some lessons can only be learned through difficulty, I observed, through facing uncomfortable truths about ourselves and others. Vanessa nodded thoughtfully. The night you told me you were my anonymous investor. I've never felt such a complex mix of shame and shock. It forced me to confront not just how I had treated you, but why. What that revealed about my values and assumptions. Growth often begins with discomfort, I said, gently patting Thomas's back as he dozed against my shoulder. With the courage to face what we'd rather avoid. 5 years passed in the blink of an eye. Thomas grew from a curious infant into an energetic kindergartner with his father's thoughtful nature and his mother's creative eye. On the morning of his 5th birthday, I arrived at their home, no longer the sleek downtown apartment, but a warm, spacious house with a garden where Thomas could explore, carrying a carefully wrapped package. Grandma Eleanor, Thomas launched himself into my arms the moment I stepped through the door, nearly toppling the gift I carried. Is that for me? Thomas, Vanessa gently admonished, appearing from the kitchen wearing an apron dusted with flour. What did we say about greeting people before asking about presents? He straightened immediately, composing his features into an exaggerated formality that made me struggle not to laugh. Good morning, Grandma Eleanor. Thank you for coming to my birthday celebration. I hope you had a pleasant journey to our home. I matched his solemn tone. Good morning, Thomas. The journey was indeed pleasant, and I'm delighted to join your celebration. Then I winked and whispered, and yes, this is for you, but for later. He grinned, all pretense of formality abandoned, and took my hand. Come see what Mom and I made. In the kitchen, an impressive birthday cake stood on the counter. Not the professionally crafted confection that might once have been Vanessa's style, but a somewhat lopsided creation clearly made with love and Thomas's enthusiastic assistance. Thomas designed it himself, Vanessa explained, pride evident in her voice. He wanted it to look like the fashion studio. Indeed, the cake featured a miniature replica of Wright and Chen designs, complete with tiny fabric swatches made from fondant and minuscule mannequins fashioned from sugar paste. It's magnificent, I declared, genuinely impressed. A true work of art. Daddy helped with the structure, Thomas admitted. But I did all the decorating, and Grandma Olivia taught me how to make the tiny flowers. The mention of Olivia reminded me how thoroughly our extended family dynamics had evolved. Over the past 5 years, Vanessa's mother and I had developed a genuine friendship, bonded initially by our shared adoration of Thomas, but eventually expanding to include mutual respect for our different strengths and perspectives. Speaking of your other grandmother, Vanessa said, checking her watch, she and Grandpa should be here any minute with your cousins. The cousins were actually the children of Maya Rodriguez, our first mentorship student, who had become so integrated into our extended family that Thomas considered her 2 young children his cousins. Maya had graduated from design school 3 years earlier and now ran her own small but thriving atelier, specializing in adaptive clothing for people with disabilities. The doorbell rang, announcing the arrival of the first guests. Soon, the house filled with laughter and conversation as family, both biological and chosen, gathered to celebrate Thomas's milestone birthday. Olivia Chen arrived wearing one of my handmade linen dresses from the Practical Elegance collection, a line we had developed together that combined her eye for sophisticated detail with my emphasis on comfort and functionality. Dr. Chen carried a carefully selected book about dinosaurs, having learned early in Thomas's life that educational gifts were received with as much enthusiasm as toys. Maya arrived with her children and husband, bearing a gift wrapped in fabric remnants from her studio, a signature touch that Thomas immediately recognized. "It's from Maya's special cabinet," he exclaimed, handling the package with reverence. The special cabinet contained Maya's most precious fabrics, saved for her most significant designs and occasionally gift wrapping for important people in her life. As Thomas opened presents and blew out candles, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought us to this harmonious moment. The painful night I had overheard Vanessa's cruel words seemed almost to belong to another lifetime, a catalyst that had triggered a cascade of truth-telling and transformation that none of us could have anticipated. Later, as the party wound down, and Thomas played in the garden with his cousins under Michael's watchful eye, Vanessa joined me on the patio, offering a cup of tea. "He hasn't opened your gift yet," she observed. "He's saving it for last. Whatever it is, he knows it's special." I smiled, warmed by this evidence of Thomas's perception. "It's something I've been working on for a while. I hope he likes it." "He adores everything you give him," Vanessa replied, "but especially the things you make yourself." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching Thomas navigate the complex social dynamics of a game he was inventing on the spot. Something involving dinosaurs running a fashion company, from what I could gather. "I was thinking earlier about how much has changed," Vanessa said, her gaze still on her son. 5 years ago, we were just learning how to truly be a family. Now I can hardly remember what it was like before." "Before Thomas?" I asked. "Before you," she clarified. "Before I understood what family really means." before I learned to see beyond status and appearances to what truly matters. It was perhaps the most direct acknowledgement she had ever made of how profoundly our relationship had transformed over the years. "We've all grown," I said simply. "That's what healthy relationships allow us to do." Vanessa nodded thoughtfully. The mentorship program reminded me of something yesterday. A new student was talking about how she never expected someone like her, from a poor neighborhood without connections, to have a shot at a real design career. It made me realize how close I came to missing the opportunity to know you, truly know you, because I was so blinded by superficial judgments. "But you did learn to see me," I reminded her gently. "That's what matters in the end." She smiled, her expression softening with genuine emotion. "The night you told me you were my anonymous investor, it was like seeing clearly for the first time, realizing that the person I had dismissed as irrelevant had been holding me up all along." Before I could respond, Thomas came bounding up the patio steps, his face flushed with excitement. "Grandma Eleanor, can I open your present now? Everyone's watching other people's toys, so it can be just us." I nodded, touched by his desire to make the moment special. "Of course, sweetheart." He settled cross-legged on the patio, carefully, unwrapping the package to reveal a handcrafted book bound in soft leather with his name embossed in gold on the cover. "A book about me?" he asked, running his fingers over the lettering. "Not exactly," I explained. "It's a book about our family, about how we found our way to each other, and what we learned along the journey." Thomas opened the cover, his expression turning curious as he examined the first page. A beautifully illustrated image of a young woman holding a baby, surrounded by the trappings of a modest but loving home. "Is that you, Grandma? And is the baby daddy?" "It is," I confirmed. "I started at the beginning, with your father's childhood and the sacrifices and joys of being a single mother." He turned the pages slowly, absorbing the story that unfolded through words and images. My years of hard work and determination, Michael's growth and education, his meeting with Vanessa, their early relationship. The illustrations were simple, but evocative, capturing the essence of each chapter in our family history. Vanessa leaned forward, her interest clearly piqued as Thomas reached the pages depicting her own entrance into the story. I had been careful in my portrayal, neither sanitizing the difficult parts nor emphasizing them unduly. The book acknowledged the initial disconnect between us, the class differences and misunderstandings that had created barriers, but focused on the journey toward mutual respect and genuine connection. "You made this yourself?" Thomas asked, clearly impressed by the craftsmanship. "The whole thing?" "I did," I confirmed. "The writing, the illustrations, the binding. It's been my special project for the past year." He continued turning pages until he reached the section about his own birth, depicted as a moment of perfect family unity. The subsequent illustrations showed his early years surrounded by love from all sides: parents, grandparents, extended family, the Wright and Chen community that had become an essential part of our shared life. "There's Grandma Olivia teaching me to fold dumplings," he exclaimed, pointing to one illustration. "And here's Maya showing me how to draw fashion pictures." The final pages looked toward the future, with blank spaces for new chapters yet to be written. On the last illustrated page, our entire extended family stood together, not just blood relatives, but all the people who had become integral to our lives. Maya and her family, Robert Harrington Jr. and his wife, several graduates of the mentorship program who had remained close, even Frank from the diner where I had once worked, who now supplied baked goods for all Wright and Chen events. "This is everyone who loves you," I explained. "Your family extends beyond just the people who share your blood. It includes all those who choose to be part of your life, who contribute to your story in meaningful ways." Thomas nodded, his young face solemn with understanding beyond his years. "And the empty pages are for what happens next?" "Exactly," I confirmed. Because your story is still being written, our family story continues to unfold. He closed the book carefully, handling it with a reverence that touched my heart. "This is the best present ever," he declared. "Better than the dinosaur robot from Grandpa Chen." Vanessa laughed softly. High praise indeed. She reached over to examine the book more closely. "Eleanor, this is extraordinary. You've captured our journey so beautifully." "I wanted Thomas to understand where he comes from," I explained. "Not just the facts of his lineage, but the emotional truth of how we became a family in the deepest sense, through challenge and growth, through seeing each other clearly." Thomas wrapped his arms around me in a fierce hug. "Thank you, Grandma." "Eleanor, I'm going to keep adding to it forever." As he ran off to show his treasure to Michael, Vanessa remained beside me, her gaze following her son with undisguised love. "You know," she said quietly, "when I first met you, I couldn't imagine what you could possibly teach me. Now I realize I learn from you every day about resilience, about integrity, about what constitutes true wealth. The learning goes both ways," I assured her. "You've taught me about second chances, about the courage to acknowledge mistakes and grow from them." She smiled, a genuine expression far removed from the polished social mask she had once worn constantly. "Remember when I told you that you smelled like old people?" If I could go back and speak to that version of myself, I'm not sure she would even recognize who I've become. Growth often transforms us beyond our own recognition, I agreed. But I think she would be proud of the woman you are now. A successful designer, yes, but more importantly, someone who values substance over status, who recognizes worth beyond wealth. As twilight settled over the garden and guests began to depart, I found myself in a quiet moment with Michael, watching as Thomas demonstrated his new dinosaur robot to Maya's children. "The book was perfect, Mom," Michael said, his arm around my shoulders in a casual half embrace. "You captured our family story beautifully." "It's quite a story," I observed. Not one I could have imagined when I overheard Vanessa's comment that night. He winced slightly at the memory. "I still feel ashamed when I think about that. Not just what she said, but my failure to defend you." "Life rarely moves in a straight line," I reminded him gently. "Sometimes we need to hit uncomfortable truths before we can find our way to authentic connection." "Still," he persisted, "I should have recognized your worth long before that moment of revelation, should have seen you clearly all along." "We all have blind spots," I said. "What matters is our willingness to acknowledge them when they're revealed, to learn and grow rather than becoming defensive." He nodded thoughtfully. "You know, that's what I most want Thomas to learn from your story. Not just the practical lessons about hard work and perseverance, though those matter too, but the deeper wisdom about honoring people's inherent dignity, regardless of their background or circumstances." "I think he's well on his way to understanding that," I replied, watching as Thomas carefully helped Maya's younger child position a tiny dinosaur figure. "He's growing up surrounded by people who value character above credentials, who recognize that true worth transcends external markers of success." "Thanks to you," Michael said simply, "for having the courage to speak your truth that night, even when it would have been easier to stay silent. For showing us a better way to be a family." As the evening drew to a close, I prepared to depart, declining Michael and Vanessa's invitation to stay the night. Much as I loved being with them, I also valued returning to my own space, the comfortable home I had created for myself, filled with books and art and evidence of a life well lived on my own terms. Thomas insisted on walking me to the door, his small hand warm in mine. "Grandma Eleanor," he said as we reached the threshold, "will you tell me more stories next time? About when Daddy was little, like me?" "Of course," I promised. "There are many stories still to share." He nodded, satisfied with this commitment. "And maybe someday I can write stories about you in the book." so everyone remembers. I'd like that very much, I told him, touched by the sentiment. As I drove home through the quiet evening streets, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past 5 years. From the painful moment of overhearing Vanessa's cruel dismissal to the flourishing family bonds we now shared, it was a transformation none of us could have predicted. The revelation of my role as Vanessa's anonymous investor had been a catalyst, forcing a reckoning that might never have come otherwise. But the true change had come in the slow, steady work of rebuilding, of learning to see each other clearly, to value each other authentically, to create a family based on mutual respect rather than obligation or financial dependence. Back in my own home, I settled into my favorite chair with a cup of tea, surveying the evidence of a life rich in meaning, if not in luxury. Photos of Thomas lined my bookshelves, alongside images of Wright and Chen fashion shows, mentorship program, graduations, family gatherings that bridged once unbridgeable divides. On my desk sat a framed note Thomas had written in his careful kindergarten printing. To Grandma Eleanor, the best grandma and fashion partner. Love, Thomas. Beside it was a fashion magazine featuring Vanessa's latest collection, designs we had developed together, blending her aesthetic sensibility with my practical wisdom. I smiled, remembering the woman I had been 5 years ago, hurt by dismissal, uncertain of my place in my son's new life, secretly funding my daughter-in-law's dreams while being treated as an embarrassing obligation. That woman could never have imagined the family we would become, the bonds we would forge through honesty and growth. The journey hadn't been easy. There had been uncomfortable conversations, painful reckonings, moments of vulnerability on all sides. But from those difficult truths had emerged something authentic and enduring. A family built on seeing each other clearly and valuing each other genuinely. My phone chimed with an incoming message. It was from Vanessa, sending a photo taken. Earlier that day, Thomas surrounded by his extended family, my handcrafted book open on his lap, his face alight with the joy of belonging. The caption read simply, "From invisible investor to irreplaceable grandmother. Thank you for teaching us what family truly means." I set down my phone, a sense of quiet contentment washing over me. The woman who had once said I smelled like old people now recognized the wisdom that came with those years, the value beyond financial investment. In revealing myself as her anonymous investor, I had done more than assert my financial contribution to her success. I had claimed my rightful place as a person worthy of basic dignity and respect, not because of what I could provide, but because of who I was. And in the years that followed, that initial reckoning had blossomed into something none of us could have anticipated. A family bound by genuine appreciation for each other's unique gifts, a partnership that enriched all our lives in ways that transcended material success. As I prepared for bed that night, I found myself reflecting on the title of the book I had created for Thomas, Seeing Clearly, A Family's Journey. In the end, that's what it had all been about. Learning to see beyond assumptions and appearances, to the true worth that lies within each person. My son's wife had once said I smelled like old people, never knowing I was funding her business. But the real treasure hadn't been the money I provided. It had been the journey we all took from judgment to understanding, from dismissal to respect, from fractured connections to genuine family bonds. The smell of old people, it turned out, was actually the scent of experience, of wisdom earned through years of meeting life's challenges with grace and determination. And once Vanessa learned to recognize that, she discovered a richness far more valuable than any financial investment I could have made. In revealing my role as her anonymous investor, I had done more than assert my financial contribution. I had initiated a transformation that changed all our lives for the better, teaching us to value what truly matters and to see each other with clear, appreciative eyes. And that, in the end, was the greatest investment of all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.